Today's lesson is all about tension in the left hand fingers, and the left hand thumb. And what we're going to do is we're just going to have a little bit of a discussion as well as a lesson and go over some exercises that should help you avoid some of that tension and just to discover things you might be doing that are causing the tension. So before we dive into the exercises and the ideas, one of the first things you have to do is you should check out my lesson on posture and position with the guitar, because every time we talk about a hand position, if our posture and alignment of our instrument aren't good, then talking about the left hand won't be much use because it won't be in the proper position to begin with. So review the posture and guitar position lesson. Also review my lesson on left hand technique. So that's just the proper alignment of the left hand. You know, you don't want it angled wrong. You don't want, the thumb way over. You don't want fingers folded over, things like that. We want to be close to the fret with curved fingers, a relaxed hand, in good posture. So those two lessons are essential before you start tackling tension issues, because it all stems, it begins there. That's your foundation. And now we're going to talk about some extra ideas related to tension in the left hand. So I think before we go into some muting exercises and like string tension exercises, the first thing I want to do is just talk about the vice grip on the guitar, because a lot of people clamp with their hands and between their fingers and their thumb. So let's just talk about that. Now, when your fingers are curved and you're playing on your fingertip and you're close to the fret, it doesn't require much pressure to actually push down that string. And we'll talk about that later with muted exercises where we mute and then slowly push down until we get a sound. But right now, I want you to just do an experiment for me where you just remove the thumb from the equation and play a note. As long as your fingers are curved and you're close to the fret and playing on your fingertip, you don't even need your thumb. It might feel a little unstable to not have it anchored there, but just by removing it, it teaches you something about the guitar. It teaches you that you don't need this vice grip, even on bar chords. You can see my thumb's hanging out there. We wouldn't play like this. This is just an experiment. But the idea is that you don't need the thumb to actually play. The weight of the arm just kind of coming down, and the curved fingers, except for the bar finger, is enough to depress those little tiny nylon strings. So the idea that you have to vice grip is just, it's not true. You don't want to do that. Now, when the thumb does go on the back of the neck, it just kind of stays straight and relaxed. It doesn't curve up because there's no tension needed in it. It's just very relaxed there. And it can help anchor the hand in place and kind of orient it and position it. But there's no vice grip, or we want to avoid the vice grip between the thumb and the fingers. We want to avoid clamping with that fist. So the thumb just can just stay out of the equation. And this is just a way of, by playing without the thumb, it's just an exercise to experiment with that idea. So that's the first thing that you can do. Now, another great exercise for relieving tension in the left hand is muted exercises. A muted exercise is when we touch the string, but we don't push the string down into the fret. It creates kind of a muted sound. So if you just did one finger per fret across the strings, that is a great way to practice the movements of playing without any tension at all. So it's a really great way to build the movement into your hand without the tension. which is so important because I think as beginners, we kind of learn to really push hard. Our technique isn't very refined yet. And so we end up pushing very hard, and that just becomes a muscle memory habit that we have to clamp, clamp, clamp. So this helps us get rid of that old muscle memory and build in this new light muscle memory that can be accurate and do the movements. And it doesn't matter if you're doing like other types of exercises. Whatever exercise you have, as long as there's not open strings, you can do it muted, right? And do the motion. What you might find is that you're so relaxed when you do muted exercises that you can even do stretches that you never thought you could do before because tension really interferes with those stretches. Now, the other thing I want to talk about now is just zeroing in on how much pressure is actually needed to play the guitar. So for this, I do a buzzed exercise. So if we take our muted exercise with our first finger here, and we start playing muted, but then we slowly apply a small amount of downward pressure into the fret, just to the point where it buzzes. So it's touching the string, but it's buzzing because we're pushing so lightly that it's not depressing the string against the fret. So that is like very, very close to the amount of tension that's needed. And you'll be so surprised that it requires so little strength to do that. So you can play like 3 notes on each one just to make sure you're getting that right amount of buzz. And so that's a really great experiment for teaching you how to be between this and this. It's a tension level that's between those two. Now, if we go just a hair further, so this is muted, this is buzzed, and just see how little pressure you need in order to just get that knot to buzz. And that is the amount of tension on the finger that you need in order to play the string. And you'll be surprised that it's very, very little. As long as your hand is aligned, your fingers are curved, you're close to the fret, you're playing on your fingertip, all the good technique, right? Then you're just experimenting with how little pressure is actually needed in order to play that string. And then you want to, of course, start going through the exercise using that smallest amount of pressure possible so that it doesn't buzz, but that you're not pushing anywhere beyond just a fraction beyond the buzzing exercise. So, muted exercise. Buzz exercise. And then after you've done that one, doing just a fraction more pressure so it doesn't buzz. Another great thing about these muted exercises is it can help disassociate the right hand from the left hand. So quite often when we play forte and we play hard with this hand, we start squeezing with this hand because this hand starts squeezing and then this one starts squeezing. We don't do many things in life where we would grab a bar and grab lightly with one hand or tightly with one hand and lightly with another. So we can practice muted exercises by playing really hard with this hand, but super light with the left hand. And that helps to disassociate that connection between the two hands where when we're digging in hard with this hand, we start clamping down with this one. We don't want that. What we actually want is this hand to remain super light and nimble, and this hand to do its heavier workload if needed. So if it's playing really hard, this hand can still play really light. So it helps disassociate those two hands and reset some of that old muscle memory. So I hope those ideas will help you and start you off on the process of reprogramming some of that muscle memory and just experimenting. So by playing without the thumb, we can just learn that like the weight of the arm is enough to play those strings without the vice grip. The muted exercises, muted, buzzed, and then just slightly beyond that, can really help build awareness into the left hand as to the amount of pressure that's needed, as well as disassociate the two hands from each other. If you really start working on these things, and then you compare those exercises right next to some of your repertoire where your hand is getting stressed out, you might realize that you can actually play your repertoire with a nice relaxed left hand, but you just weren't aware that you could because you've never practiced these kinds of exercises right next to your repertoire. So I would recommend that you do the exercises every day in your practice routine, but also when your hand is getting stressed out in a piece, stop, play some of these exercises, and then play that section of your repertoire and see if that will influence your hand to be more aware of the tension that it's using.